Full room. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome to our special session. I see familiar faces. I see many male leaders also. Amazing, because this is not just a women's issue, it's everyone's. Opportunities, challenges, everything. So thank you all for joining us today. I am Iris Parra, co-founder and director of Enlaza. We are a community-driven organization promoting gender-smart investments across Latin America, the States, Europe, and growing to Asia and soon Africa. We're everywhere because women's health, and everybody can relate to this, is a real concern, and we want to talk about it. So today we are inviting the experts that are going to talk about the challenges, the policy, AI, and many other important issues. At the end, you will have the opportunity to also to ask questions, and we are going to ask questions to you too. So feel free to be engaged with the conversation. I want to introduce also to my team, Bianca Glenn and Cassia Bogrod. We gathered together to talk about the femtech industry and all the opportunities that they were there. And we wanted to start with an initiative, and we're going to invite special leaders that wanted to invest, that wanted to create solutions. So please connect with us after the session if you want to be part of this movement. This is just starting, so stay connected with us. We're going to share our emails in the last slide. And also, I wanted to know a little bit about you. You can raise your hand if you are a founder. Amazing. If you're an investor, great. If you are working in a government agency, perfect. Corporate leader, great. And consultants, ecosystem builders, amazing, amazing. Thank you. So now we know that we have a variety of profiles here, and I'm going to introduce the panelists. We have Carmen Van Bilster. She's the chair of Top Sector Life Science, and Dr. Derek, who's coming from the UK actually, and he's a co-founder of Medical Consulting Group. And we have also Valentina Milanova, founder and CEO of Dyer. Cassia, you have them.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yeah, cool. So I'm super still processing the fact that the whole room is full. You know, we're okay, are you gonna be able to fill up the room? And then boom. So that also tells you a little bit about the topic and how urgent it is. I'm Kasia. I'm a co-founder of Embrace Health, based in the Netherlands, originally from Poland. So also very happy to connect with everyone afterwards as well. We prepared a panel today with part of the guided questions. One topic before we start, there's a recording happening for exact reason of the room being full, which we realized this morning with 250 signups. We're okay, there's how many chairs? 100. So the session will be recorded and then placed on the health platform, so that you also have access to that. Shall we start? Yeah? Cool. So we're gonna start bold with a question. Who actually holds the power to drive real change in women's health, and are they using it well? I have to tell you, we had a bit of discussion about this topic before, and I'm going to start with Carmen.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm really glad that there's so many different stakeholders in this field, because I find it the most difficult question that you ask us already up front, because I don't think there's one party that should drive this. I think everybody has their obligation and has a role to play in the whole domain of women's health. And one of the things I found, I'm actively in this topic now for 2 years only, while I've been already for 35 years in healthcare, only 2 years, I'm really active on the broad topic of women's health, and I found myself still very incompetent yet, and also unaware that I'm competent of a lot of topics. So I think educating and getting this bias out of our healthcare system is, I think, the role of all of us, and also the role of all you in the room. So one of the slogans that I'm kind of promote is women's health in all health policies, because it's everywhere. It's education, it's care, it is treatment, and just to drop one of the things I'm only recently aware of is that I'm active in organ on a chip already for quite a while, and I found out only a few months ago that 70% of all organoids that are developed for organ on a chip are based on male cells. Yep. So already with a complete new technology like organ on a chip, which is really at the forefront, has already a gender bias, which I was not aware of. And I'm pretty sure that almost nobody in this room was aware of. I even had a bet with an important investor recently. He said, no, that's not true. I bet it's not true. Within 24 hours, I got a message, Carmen, you win your bet. It is true. 70% also with such a new technology, it has already a gender bias, which we are not aware of. So again, I plea for women's health in all health policies and education.
Yeah, and we discussed it also, Derek. You also had a conversation about it.
I think we do have to agree that policymakers do have a very big role to play in women's health and gender, and was just reflecting the UK's experience as well. And just to give a bit of context, in 2022 we had the very big women health strategy that came out, which was a 10-year plan to outline how women's health will improve. And part of this strategy came the Women's Health Hub in England, which is a fantastic service that essentially delivers 8 different kinds of services, contraception, postpartum care, mental health, pelvic floor exercises as well. And this was going very, very well. The NHS confed that said that for every £1 that you've given into the Women's Health Hub, you get £5 back in return. But despite that, in early 2025, the government changed, obviously, and there was a huge hoo-ha that came out because the government dropped the women's health agenda and the women's health target from the NHS plan. And then the RCOG was rightfully concerned, and they put up a big statement to the government saying that please don't withdraw funding from this women's health hub. These things have proven evident from a clinical perspective, from an economical perspective, that it is very powerful things. But still, there has been this concern, and we're not quite sure where we are right now in terms of these fundings of this women health hub. So we do still have to take a lot of weightage to politics, because politics does affect how women's health is delivered in the country.
Valentina, from the founder perspective, being a founder of DIA.
So I'm Valentina, I'm the founder of DAY, and we spoke a little bit about politics, we spoke a little bit about the bet. I really hope you got paid and then reinvested the bet into women's health. No? Okay, you should claim the winnings.
It was only a bottle of champagne. So
okay. One area that I really want to give a big shout out to is the third sector, the NGO sector. So there's an organization called Wellbeing of Women that if you're not familiar with, I really hope you familiarize yourselves with Wellbeing of Women. And very few people are aware of how incredible their work has been, even though they operate on a shoestring budget every year. It is thanks to Wellbeing of Women that we understood that it was HPV that causes cervical cancer. So we're now able to actually eradicate cervical cancer within our lifetime. And it's thanks to the work of Wellbeing of Women that prenatal ultrasounds went from being the size of half of this room to being part of modern prenatal care. So if there's one thing very tangible, very practical that you can do today to support women's health, it's to invest in Wellbeing of Women. They do accept charitable donations, because there's such few organizations that can so confidently say that they've produced such an incredible return on investment for the public sector and for the private sector and for women and AFAB individuals across the world. So it's a shared effort between government, between private organizations, between NGOs, and it all really goes back to how incredibly underfunded women's health innovation is in the public and the private sector. But we can all fix this together, through the voting choices that we make, but also through the way in which we invest our private funding.
True. And Carmen, you spoke a little bit about the policies already. Are there any policies that come to your mind that we could start push for, whether it's
Well, I think in the Netherlands, we are actually quite behind in terms of national policy. Although there's a new the first policy about women's health expected actually this month. I hope even if our government has been fallen, it will still stick. So we will have a policy which will address both backlogs in knowledge, of course. There's a huge backlog in knowledge and a huge backlog in funding women-specific or women-sensitive diseases. So that will definitely be part of the policy. But I think the other area is what I mentioned. So the also education, making people aware. Even in our Dutch healthcare system, there's a lot of female leadership in healthcare organizations. So I think there also everybody should take their role there. But there is also, I'm sure, and there is some funding already made available to close the knowledge gap on female-specific diseases, as you also mentioned. There's a huge lack of funding in there.
Yeah.
And we have in the Netherlands organization Women Inc., who's also already lobbying for, I think, over 10 years for this knowledge gap. They have calculated that if we address only in the Netherlands 3 of the most common female-specific diseases, we can already earn over 7 billion. So again, also into what you said, there is a huge business opportunity.
Yeah, it's not a niche. There's money in it.
It's
Go
not,
invest.
it's not a niche, and it's also not a female issue, as you
No.
said. It's really a system and a society issue.
Sure. And there's a lot of hype around AI. And I actually, last week, I was at the London Tech Week and then at the AI Summit, and everything is with AI, and AI, you put in everything. But then when it comes to AI and health, and I'll ask also you, Derek, how do we make sure that we also hear that we serve it well with health, but also when it comes to women's health, how do we look at the data?
Exactly. So that's a very, very good question. I think we have to first start off by stating the fact that if we don't design for equity, we end up designing for exclusion. And AI, if it's trained on non-representative data, all we're doing is automating inequity at scale. So if you think inequity is bad now, with AI, it's going to be inequity Pro Max version 5.0. And we've had this exact conversation in the previous panel discussion, and I think the key thing, as Thomas mentioned as well, it's not just one person's responsibility. We need the regulators like the MHRA, the FDA, the EU MDR to demand and to provide guidance to developers to say that, hey, I'm not going to give you the regulatory approval unless your data sets are representative of what you're trying to do. The funders themselves, both institutional investors and grant funders, need to also be savvy about AI, understanding that products that are built using non-representative data have poorer functionality and therefore poorer adoption, and therefore should only give their very precious dollars to those who understand this, because it is expensive to do representative data. And lastly, and quite importantly, the buyers, the clinicians themselves, have to be able to scrutinize these data sets, almost like how a doctor would scrutinize a drug, to scrutinize the evidence and scrutinize the way the AI is developed, to say, hey, is your AI algorithm going to work in my local population because it's representative enough? And we find that only when the regulators, the funders, the buyers all sing from the same hymn sheet, that developers will be incentivized to build things properly. If not, they would just do the bare minimum and call it lean or agile.
If I may add something to it, it sounds perhaps very logical, and everybody would say, yeah, sure, we do. But I think reality is that we don't. So the same as for organoids. Also, I learned recently, digital twins, almost 70, also for digital twins, which are an important data for building AI. Also there, 70% of the current digital twins are based on male data.
Yeah, and it's I love what you said about you cannot exclude when you talk about the equity. It's indeed something which we need to build from. Valentina, with they being active in the period care, in diagnostics, are you looking at the AI in your space? Is there a space for it?
I do often ask myself if I could just pitch Day as AI tampons, whether everyone would feel a lot more comfortable, especially the investment community. But in all seriousness, I think we need to be really careful not to vilify AI in the women's health conversation. And I was quite worried last week to read this Cambridge study that came out, which interviewed 30 women on their use of apps, menstrual tracking apps. And there was, a big public outrage about the way in which the data is stored and shared on these apps. And these are all very valid conversations, but unless we create the infrastructure that enables us to collect female health data, we're never going to be able to bridge the gender data gap. So we need to be at the forefront of technology so as to not be left behind, as we have been with digital twins and with organs on a chip. So I often think about what are some of the ways in which they can make sense of the data that we hold, and how can we share it with the leading minds in women's health today, with the researchers who want answers to how to treat the female physiology, how to diagnose the female physiology. So for the past few years, we have been building a biobank and a de-identified medical database so that organizations like Liverpool Women's Hospital can really build on top of these data sets. Because that's our number one issue from a clinical perspective, is we simply don't have enough data on how most medical devices and most diagnostic devices and pharmaceuticals affect women versus men, partially because of the way in which we design clinical trials and partially because of the overwhelming lack of funding for meaningful women's health innovation.
Yeah, but this is so true, and it's also, there's a bit of a bias indeed about the menstrual app tracking and what happens there. I was at the panel once with Ida Tien, the founder of Clue, who actually, she addressed it, saying that yes, it's true. Of course, at the end of the day, you want to feel your body. You want to be able to connect with your body. You shouldn't have an app to tell you how you feel or what you feel, but the side, let's say that the benefit of having those apps is exactly what you just said, Valentina, about the richness of the data and how many researchers are approaching Clue, for example, in this case, to get this data from them, of course, with the right approval, with the privacy policy in place. But then, thanks to this data, being able to do this study with the big representative group with diversity in it as well. So it's really something that maybe we don't think about it first. Like, okay, I'm giving this data to the app, right? Like, should I just not be able to feel it, to track it, to connect with your body? But you are actually then also helping to make that step in women's health.
If I can just super quickly add to that, as a patient, you need to have your data that you're armed with in order to demand the best possible standard of care from your provider, because the data shows that we are frequently subject of medical gaslighting, particularly when it comes to conditions associated with female pain. Female pain is normalized, it is deprioritized, so having your symptoms in an app validates them when you go and seek care, instead of having to remember in the moment, on the spot, how heavy was your last menstrual cycle and how painful was the cycle before that. It is all written down. So these can actually be incredibly powerful tools as we demand better healthcare as individual patients, not just as innovators.
And Valentina, are there already organizations making use of your database? Because I think it's extremely valuable.
Liverpool Women's Hospital is using our de-identified vaginal microbiome datasets in order to identify novel non-invasive diagnostics for endometrial cancer. A lot of patients currently with endometrial cancer get diagnosed when they're already at stage 3 and stage 4, when it's too challenging frequently to treat the cancer. So what we've seen from our early data is that there's an association between Prevotella, a very common vaginal infection associated with bacterial vaginosis, and having stage 2 endometrial cancer.
Okay. In the Netherlands, we have, that's only for 3 years, Voices for Women. Perhaps people know that, only exists for 3 years. They also are building now a knowledge platform. And this is especially because they have, almost all these women have been going through doctors for years with problems that were not properly diagnosed. So 80% of undiagnosable problems that came at GPs are from females. And these are usually, and then these females are sent away, well, it's between your ears. It's a mental problem, so they get medication for depression or whatever. And then sometimes after 10 years, they found that there was actually a physical problem.
Yeah.
So this is, and this Voices for Women group is now building also a similar kind of knowledge platform. I think extremely important.
Yeah, I love their work. They really make steps, and they are really the voice for women's health. And that's also what we hear. So we organize also quarterly events with, let's say, women in the audience, with the panel experts, the health experts on the panel, as Embrace Health, and that's what you hear. So women don't feel heard, they don't feel seen. They go to the doctor and they basically say it's normal. Let's go with it. About the doctors. So you focus on working, connecting the startups with the clinicians. And when I saw actually your work, I'm like, oh, this is so cool. That's exactly what, like I've been also trying to like get through it. Can you tell a little bit about it?
Yeah, so just a bit of a context, where we do the medical consulting group, it used to be called Adopt a Doc, where we really connect health tech companies with healthcare professionals. And really, we've been operational for the past 2 years, and mainly based in the UK. We do what we do. Startups, we connect them with the right clinicians so they can build better tools for healthcare. And one of the questions that Bianca wanted us to talk about as well is how should startups approach clinicians, and what are the common mistakes that we've done. I can share a very real life experience that happened in early 2024, and it's a bit of it's one of the stories that you can learn so much from. In early 2024, there was a male founder who wanted to build and innovate in the pregnancy and postpartum care space. And I thought that what he was doing was very, very cool. So I brought together a very senior O&G consultant who's operated in this space for 15, 20 years. And we just had this conversation with them. And in that one session, that one founder did the 3 cardinal sins of clinician engagement, and it was spectacular to see, actually. The first thing we started off with was they started off, all he wanted to do was just push their opinions and to push his idea onto the clinician without really getting any feedback or engagement at all. And at one point, he was almost mansplaining how their pregnancy care was delivered in the UK to a consultant who's worked for 20 years in the pregnancy care space. So you're like, okay. And the second cardinal sin that he did was when the consultant was gently trying to correct him with a little bit of like, certain wrong assumptions or certain flaws in his original idea, he just shut it all down. He was very defensive and wasn't keen to listen and just fall back to his own table research. And the third cardinal sin that he made was really, he was very keen on just building a very transactional relationship. All he really cared for was, I want to sell to you, or I want you to join me as a clinical champion, and completely disregarding this whole relationship building, And that's what we do and so that conversation was terrible. I had to do some damage control and I had to cut the session short a little bit. But to just recap, the 3 cardinal sins, I think, is number 1, just pushing your opinion on clinicians without any engagement. Number 2, not listening to feedback when it is given. And number 3, to just build very superficial transactional relationship without building relationship and trust over the period of time. And often the old saying goes, you have 2 ears, 1 mouth. It pays a lot to listen more, talk less, and to really give some interest, to show some interest to the work that the clinicians are doing, and they will naturally reciprocate. And to understand that relationship building, and after all, what we do is just really relationship building, and trust takes time to build. You might need to take 3 or 4 meetings with this clinician, but once you win them over, and they will be your strongest ally and advocate.
Yeah. Do we have anybody here in the room from NLC? No? It was actually another panel that we had in Rotterdam in May that we came, let's say, the role that you are playing. When it comes to the Netherlands, NLC actually for the first time they saw like, oh, we have so many clinicians in our network, and we were not aware that the founders have so much struggles to actually reach them. So that was when it comes to the Netherlands, that could also be
Well, I also I just mentioned that I'm only 2 years more active in the women. I realized 2 years ago that we have from the top sector set up about 20 strategic public-private partnerships on oncology, on cardiovascular, and we had none on women's health. So only recently we have set up a strategic public-private partnership, which is especially had to avoid the kind of things Derek said. So in this public-private partnership, we work together with industry, government, science organization, and patient organizations. That's what we call the quadruple helix. And we set up this, and that's is still relatively small. So we started with brain and cardiovascular with the aim to extend that further. So we will have tracks with our more specific for one disease, but of course, a women's specific or women's sensitive disease, but of course the whole life cycle and the hormones that go through that life cycle will be the connecting line into that. So that's also only very recently in the Netherlands we started this public-private partnership, especially to also avoid the very much looking from to one side of the on either the industry side or the clinic. Clinic sites. So the strategic public-private partnerships also starts to use as a kind of community building that can extend further than just the research or the innovation that are done within these public-private partnerships. But it's only in the beginning on this topic.
Difficult.
Well, you need to start somewhere, right? Valentina, last week at London Tech Week, you were also a part of the session about the NHS incubator. Is this then the similar like the private partner, the partnerships, or?
So the NHS Fellowship is a 3-year program which supports new medical devices and new types of healthcare innovation on their journey towards integrating within the NHS and supporting the NHS's goal. We were very fortunate to have been accepted earlier this year with the diagnostic tampon for HPV screening, given that the NHS has a very ambitious yet realistic goal of eradicating cervical cancer by 2040. The only way in which we're going to be able to achieve this is by increasing access to vaccination programs, increasing access to screening. The Netherlands have been doing a great job of actually enabling self-sampling for HPV for the past few years now. Australia has, the US is doing it. So it's one of the key next steps that we anticipate from the UK National Cervical Cancer Screening Committee. It's both better for the patient and it facilitates a huge cost saving for the public health system.
Yeah, indeed. So it's how do you come from the innovation, having that solution, but then also being used and put in practice. Let's talk about money. So it has to be a topic of, I think, every women's health panel discussion. And I'm looking, Carmen, at you a little bit as what can we do more to attract more funding in women's health, so that it's not a nice to have, but that it's that people really see money in it, because there is money in it. There is it's not a niche. Do we need to talk differently as founders? Do we need to attract different investors? Do we need policymakers making some push in that direction from the last 2 years that you are looking at that?
Well, I think you mentioned that the funding was actually going down, didn't you? Yep. So I didn't know that, but you just mentioned that the funding to femtech or women's health in general went down in the last 2 years?
In the last 4 years, we've actually seen a decline in the private investments going into the women's health space. This was particularly worsened in 2024 when venture capital and private investors turned their focus towards AI, hence my comment on AI tampons. I am really considering it. But yeah, we're actually going backwards when it comes to private capital going into the female health space. And whenever I share the statistic, people are always surprised because they say, oh, but we hear about women's health all the time. You know, there's always a women's health panel. It's frequently called Revolutionizing Women's Health. You know, we keep being invited to these breakfasts and lunches from investors, etc. But it's not actually trickling down to the companies. And then female founders, again, we're seeing a decrease in the funding that is going towards female founders. women are somewhat more likely than men to create solutions specifically for female health.
Yeah. So I think it's actually we have two disadvantages. Yeah? So or perhaps three disadvantages. It's not, for whatever reason, not sexy for male founders. I'm not using this word accidentally. Then there are often female founders who are less taken seriously still by the venture capitalists. In the Netherlands, only less than 1% of all venture capital goes to female founders. Less than 1% in general, so not only for health.
I believe that's the case globally as well.
I think globally it's a little bit. I heard just this morning in the US it's 5%. Somebody told me. So in the Netherlands it's less than 1%. So
I think that's Anthropic skewing the data because they have one female co-founder.
Okay, perhaps.
Oh gosh.
Well, anyhow, and then, as you also mentioned, the business opportunity is huge. But there are many. VCs choose the less risky and the less risky proposition with the highest return on investment. So I think the answer is that it should be perhaps we should convince them that it's the return on investment is as big as it is, and the risk is not as big as it looks like, perhaps, because that is and then and we still have to educate male investors that also females can be aware, and also that so all the data is there. It's not about the data is there. So I don't have one answer to be honest with you, because all the data speaks for investing.
And I think there's also another big obvious conversation that we need to have about reimbursement of as in payment, as in health systems paying for women's innovation. And the reason why I say this with a bit of a sigh, because I work with quite a few female founders who are building very, very good tools, very, very good tools, very, very good solutions for the NHS, for the UK, for the women population. One particular one that comes to mind was a company called Beanbag Health that was working on helping eating disorders and and obviously women disproportionately gets affected by eating disorders, and also for mental health, and also for other conditions as well. But the problem with the way our health systems are set up, and understand that I'm an oncology doctor, I'm a cancer doctor, the health systems tend to prioritize things like intervention, like survival. Can I increase the survival? If I can show that this drug increases the overall survival by 2 months, I will put $10 million, $1 billion into it. And we will put a lot of money into, we prioritize survival, we prioritize interventions, we prioritize hospitalizations, a reduction of hospitalization, but we don't prioritize symptom control. And this becomes a problem because a lot of problems that affect women tend to be quite symptomatic, burdensome. So things like a heavy period, things like migraine, things like fatigue, fibromyalgia, they have a very heavy burden on the symptom relief. But because as a health system and as a clinical community, we don't prioritize that as much. We only care about the things that kills you, but we don't care about the things that make your life a living hell. So when we don't have that kind of focus, we don't have that kind of understanding, and when reimbursement just doesn't fit into that mold, then how can a women's health innovation succeed?
But they're even within oncology. For instance, typically female oncology, ovarian cancer, etc., it's one of the cancers that's diagnosed late, and it's most so even within the category you say that we have a good business case. Basically, even within the good business cases, female topics are less prioritized.
I think also something which the other topic is prevention. So a lot of the startups also that I see which are active in women's health, in femtech, they are around prevention. I had a conversation myself, being a founder with an investor who basically told me that prevention is too long of a shot. So a little bit coming back also to what you say, that it's more attractive to find, indeed, invest in the solutions that give that 2 months or 6 months or that shot instead of preventing actually health issues. So that's
in the Dutch insurance system, prevention is paid by the marketing cost of an insurance company.
Yeah.
I learned.
Also interesting.
Very strange.
because they use it as a tool to track new, but they don't want to spend money on it, only out of their marketing budget.
Yeah.
Still of today.
Yeah. I'm actually curious to learn a little bit from the crowd in a second, but before we go there, go for it.
No, I was going to say, my name's Leslie Vegan, I'm the Women's Health Ambassador for England. I'm the person that's trying to implement these women's health habits. It's really nice to come to a group
And to defend them as well.
Work for me, so Dr. Kaur has talked about the Women's Health Hub and how they are such an incredible investment. And Valentina's actually given a shout out to the charity I chair, Wellbeing Women. So just to embark on that a little bit further, I think what we've got to do is completely change the way we look at women's health. Because actually the vast majority of women in this room, when they go to see health professionals, they're not ill. They're trying to do something to maintain their health or prevent them having to take time off work for their painful careers or their fertility or their menopause. And we've got to think about the fact that although prevention is a long way along, women actually visit healthcare professionals much more commonly than men, and most of the time they're not sick. So making it difficult to access cervical screening, menstrual health management, contraception, menopause, urinary problems is madness. Absolute madness. So the 1 in 5, £5 saved for every pound put in, that's a very typical Department of Health and Social Care, very cautious economic analysis. But when you paint it wider, and if you think about getting all those entirely predictable reproductive things sorted out quickly, get all those women back into the workplace more productive, looking after their children, their elderly parents, holding down posh jobs, etc., etc. You could save, if we closed that gender health gap, we would save 36 billion sterling every year. And that is 20% of the NHS budget or more. So my argument would be to those ministers who didn't say, well, we must champion the Women's Health Hub, well, never ever say goodbye to a crisis, because you get great things that come out of a crisis. And my view would be, you don't need to champion a Women's Health Hub so much as saying, we've got to have a massive shift from secondary into primary care for 51% of the population. And we've got to ensure that they can access all this much closer to home and quickly, so that we can then plough that money that we save back into the things that are going to kill them, which are going to be cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, and hereditary dementia. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Well said.
Thank you. And thank you also for joining us today for the session. So, talking about, before we go to the Q&A session, because we would like to give you also some more space for that. If there was one bold prediction you each have for the future of women's health for the next decade, seeing what you see, I'm looking at Valentina now to go first.
It's not one thing. It's a combination of factors. And if we think about history and the way in which big societal shifts and big changes have come about, it's been through a lot of patience. It has never been a singular event, a singular revolution that has actually changed our reality. So I guess the one big prediction is that we will all have to continue being very patient and very perseverant if we want to see the lasting changes that we all want to see within the women's health space. So if you're a founder, don't get frustrated, continue fundraising. If you're a researcher, continue with your research, even though you may not have received the grant funding that you needed. And we all need to engage a lot more with policymakers so that they finally feel comfortable and understand the economic and societal case behind women's health, because it's not a feminist issue, it's not a women's issue, it's a human rights and an economic and societal issue. If you look at the rates at which women are graduating from university, we're graduating at higher rates than men with higher grades. We also tend to be better compensated professionally up to the time of our first child. So we cannot afford as societies, particularly in the demographic crises that we're all facing in Europe, we cannot afford to have over half of our populations stuck at home with a hot water bottle or dropping out professionally at the peak of our career because of unmanaged menopause symptoms. This is purely an economic case. You don't have to care about the individual patient. You don't have to care about the feminist theory behind it. It's, as Dame Leslie Reagan said, it's a cash savings, economic growth issue?
For me, I have a slightly pessimistic prediction, but my feeling, having seen this ever-growing inequity between the women's health gap, I feel that industry might fill the gap where traditional healthcare has failed. So it's a bit of a bold prediction, but companies like Day will and many of the great, wonderful, fantastic, innovative companies out there will move to fill in this gap, mainly because traditional healthcare is moving too slow and people are very tired of waiting. And I think people will start to vote with their money, with their dollars, and that's my prediction.
Yeah. And if you want to vote with your money today, what do we say? Well-being of women?
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm also a little bit less optimistic because we didn't talk about it yet. You say, well, it's all about women's health. I think we all know there are quite some trends right now ongoing, and not even in our country or whatever, that are starting to deny it again. So only very short after Trump was installed, I talked to a Dutch cardiologist who said, I already cannot have access to the PubMed publications on female-specific cardiovascular issues. It's withdrawn from PubMed. So, it was already 2 weeks after. So,
just for those of you who don't understand that context, the NIA established women's health institutes, and then the Trump administration canceled them. So now women's health is under auxiliary biology by the NIA, one of the largest funders of research globally.
Thank you for that addition. So I'm not also, to be honest, I think we have to strive very, very hard to keep at least some progress in this domain, because there are definitely also forces who wants to go backwards.
Yeah.
So, and again, that comes back to my very first comment. I don't think I don't want to count on one particular stakeholder or particularly party, or particularly stakeholder or particularly either government or industry, whatever. I think we all have to keep striving and get progress into that, and keep repeating the data that is there and the business opportunity, etc. And we can't. I think it will not be solved by itself.
No.
That's my feeling.
One very quick thing. How many of you are from the UK today in the audience? Okay. Are you aware that abortion is not decriminalized yet in the UK? So we have a big vote that's happening this summer, and we have an actual opportunity to enshrine abortion as healthcare within UK laws and legislations, because currently what's happening is that we have these political figures in the UK which are trying to appease US backers and US funders for their next campaign, who are trying to instigate abortion rights and abortion care as a societal issue in the UK when it really isn't, and it hasn't been. In the UK, we believe in abortion care and abortion access, so we have a very important opportunity this summer to actually ensure that we have a system similar to that of Northern Ireland, where you don't have to ask permission in order to obtain abortion health. So that's a very tangible thing that we have to change this summer in the UK. And we criticize the US all the time for its lack of women's rights, but in the UK we have to look inward as well and see that one of the most fundamental pieces of women's health rights we actually don't have currently.
I'm originally from Poland, where we have the same issue when it comes to that already. Super passionate about it, but also, really happy to see the gathering today with all of you here in the room, because that speaks for itself. So that's also for us invitation to work harder, to make those sessions more often, and to keep that dialogue going, because it's
not
like
only the dialogue, we should keep acting.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned that there's a lot of sessions, etc. But we really have to change the investors.
Yeah.
We have to change the policy, and we have to make all the boards of all the care organization again, which are a lot of females, to take their own responsibility and get out of this bias that is there. Very deep in our healthcare system, there is a huge bias everywhere.
Yeah.
The abortion debate is tomorrow, 17th.
I was in.
So if anyone from the UK, would you please make a decision to write to your MP, email your MP tonight, to ask them to decriminalise abortion. Women are putting
Yeah.
It's probably going to be tomorrow.
And just so you understand the scale and depth of the issue, over the past 4 years, multiple women have been through a judge and jury trial because they had a miscarriage, which was deemed to be an illegal abortion. So this is actually a very pressing issue in the UK right now.
We're going to open to the questions, so perfect.
Sorry. Yeah. I was just wondering, because I've been working in the industry for some time, and it's already for a very long time known that the health focuses on men's health, and nothing changed. And we have now this wave of awareness, and we're always talking about it, but how are we going to ensure that there are really changes going to be happen?
Well, I think I've seen already in the Netherlands many grants that force you, for instance, if you do research, then you have to how do you say that, address diversity. So not only male, female, but also race, etc. So I think the Heart Foundation in the Netherlands and also Zon en Wee already have that for over 10 years. But that's still the last 10 years. So you see, also as I mentioned, there will become a national health strategy in the Netherlands, which also will address this topic. So you see, but I know in education, for instance, it's still very much lacking. So that's also why I plea, it's not one specific stakeholder, it is everywhere. We everywhere need women's health in all health policies.
And I would pick on what you just said about the education, because that's really where you start. So really with the girls of the age of whatever it's about.
Not the girls, with the young people.
With the young people, yeah.
Not only the girls, everybody, all young.
Yeah.
I would actually like to pick onto that, because I'm a scientific advisor to the German Ministry of Research, and I'm very interested in how do you think the transfer can happen? Because one thing is that we have the policies that people need to account for gender-specific research, but how does it actually get transferred into solutions that we see in our day-to-day life?
Is this something, Derek, that you can pick up?
I think, well, I guess as we mentioned just now, there has to be real carrots and sticks in place. We do have to have, so I'll give you an example. If you go to datadiversity.org, you will see an incredible initiative called the Standing Together Initiative. And what the Standing Together Initiative is, a multinational, multidisciplinary collaboration that brought together experts all over the world to inform on how should data sets be created and curated so that it is a representative data sets, so from which AI solutions can be built. That's good. It's very, very good. It's a very good piece of research, but it doesn't have teeth, you see. It doesn't quite bite onto what developers need to do or what developers need to say. So it still falls back upon those who have power, which is the regulators. They do have to come up with some very specific guidance and say, hey, you got to do this in this particular way. I got to see a certain percentage of women, a certain percentage of ethnicity, a certain percentage of different socio-economic groups available in your research and in your data before I give you your regulatory approval. And likewise, the entire medical community has to kind of back this up as well. But fundamental to that is education. People are not going to know how to scrutinize this if they don't have any idea how AI is being built in the first place. How many clinicians truly out there who understand what a training of an algorithm looks like, or even understand what the term data set means? Not that many. So there is still a huge need for education at the grassroots for clinicians and also for health systems, investors, and grant funders.
What I see in the Netherlands, there's a lot of debate about transparent algorithms. Also, not that doctors should know how to do that, but to have some transparency on the algorithms. I see hardly any discussion on, indeed, the diversity of the database, which is, I think, much more relevant. I was even wondering myself, I don't know, in the UI Act, the European AI Act, do you know if there are rules on the diversity of the database? Because that should be in place, but to be honest, I don't know myself.
It's tough to say there's a 234-page
No,
report.
but we're talking about the basis.
True.
So we both we both don't know if there is in the EU AI Act, which is the new law for the next couple of years. We both don't know if there is something on the mandatory diversity in the database. I think that's, again, I find myself unaware.
Indeed.
I would like to add something to the discussion. I'm an investor in healthcare since quite some time. And I think your question was right. Reimbursement. We can all be very angry about what's happening, but we have to find business models for female health solutions. That's an investor's question, and we have to answer that. And we can do it via politics, arguing health insurances, politicians, that there need to be reimbursement there for prevention and for other programs, or we have to make B2C apps where women are able to pay. Otherwise, if you say just translational and the moral, I'm a woman, yeah, so I get it, but an investor needs to see a professional business case, and that's what we should work on. If you want to get beyond seeing what's going on in research and translation, it's not working. And that's the investor's question, and we should try to make that work. And it is working. There are companies out there in breast cancer screening who use AI, and they are much better. And they find more women with early stage breast cancer. So the investment cases are there, still not reimbursed, the doctor's paying. So I think we should think more a bit about how is this going to be paid, and how can we make politics paying for that? Or how do we find other solutions? That is a question investors asking, and I see these kind of proposals on my table every day.
I fully agree, yeah, but sorry, okay.
I was just going to say, I think it's super important if you're going to be successful in femtech, in women's health as an entrepreneur, you need to have a blend between direct-to-patient and B2B. You cannot only rely on D2C or direct-to-patient, because Meta and Google change their algorithms every week, and they have a bias against women's health as well. We know that women's health content is regularly censored on Google, Meta, TikTok, Amazon. That's unrealistic. We can't create algorithms that rival Meta and Google. We need to have access to Meta and Google in order to scale our solutions. And while we're dealing with the issues in direct-to-consumer, B2B opens up certain opportunities, whether that be retail, insurance, reimbursement, etc. But then again, we face an uphill battle there. So in the UK, in private insurance, there's the clause of exemption, which is conditions of the womb, which is a term that sounds as if it's from the 16th century, but basically if you have endometriosis or if you have a miscarriage, you're not covered by your private insurance policy because of your condition of the womb. In the US, endometriosis, for example, doesn't have a code. It doesn't have a reimbursement code. Period pain, because it's not really quantified as a true healthcare issue, we just think that we can prescribe ibuprofen and be done with it, it also doesn't have a reimbursement code. So I think it's super important in female health to have that diversified go-to-market approach where you both have direct-to-consumer and B2B, because it's such a nascent field, being a femtech company, that you need to build the revenue streams as you're building your company, and therefore you need diversification.
And then, as I mentioned, it's not an issue if there is no business case. Investors choose the business case which is less risky and the biggest. So if there's any risk in it, for instance, will this be well or not reimbursed, they drop it. Even if you can say, well, there is a business case, it's for investors, it's more risky than something that they can invest in where that is already assured. That's as simple as it is.
But a reimbursement code is what I'm talking about, because if you have a code, you have reimbursement. So that we should work on.
That just takes
time.
years.
That takes
and it takes a lot
years.
of funding.
Otherwise, then we should find ways that women are going to pay. Maybe for
So that's
The D2C.
That's the way Valentino is doing it. Valentino is doing it. But just say we have to make sure it's been reimbursed, yes. But it takes far too long. And then again, investors will pick something that have a faster and a less risky return on investment.
And
well,
then
ask investors.
We do also have to...
I'm an investor for 28 years in healthcare. That's why I'm telling you something. So I'm an investor in healthcare for a very long time. I invest in female health. That's why I'm telling you, think about the business model.
But you're assuming that femtech founders don't think about the business model. It's all we think about. also on the topic of investors constantly invest in things for which there isn't a clear business model. Was there a business model for AI when we invested in OpenAI? No, it was a money-sinking pit. And now we figured out what the business model is, barely. Like, what is the business model behind Amazon? Amazon are yet to turn a profit. Like, it's, we also need to give companies time to figure out what their business model is, and we need to take a bet on women's health if we think it's a big enough opportunity.
We have time for one last question.
Okay, I'll try and make it a good one. But just to add on that, I thought it's super interesting that actually the investors ask female founders much more about risk-based questions in a negative rather than kind of growth questions to male founders. So there's a lot of bias within that kind of risk metrics. But
that's why
I'm going to switch tack because I know this is a big topic. So I'm going to switch tack to privacy and good data sharing. I'm social armor. I'm a data fund, but I'm also a former founder myself too. So you had mentioned about the sharing, the good sharing, and that addressing this like bias in the data and the inequality of the female data being available. So I'm very passionate about making data available whilst respecting privacy. But what I'm concerned about is, so my experience of the last 6 years, I've lived in the US, I'm from the UK, and now living in Portugal, is I've had to sort of take control of my own medical record and navigate between a very complex system in the US and quite complex for me in Portugal and the UK, and sort of bring all that together. And so my own personal data has felt in different places, and I've kind of had to sort of pull that together and use a bit of AI and plug in my own system. But with all these different apps, I suppose is that I've got a concern about the silos of data, and people, and you're talking about kind of women being empowered with the data in their pocket and against medical gaslighting. But how do we truly make sure that we connect the dots and make that available in a good way and connected with the back to the greater whole, with respecting privacy, with the acknowledgement that data rights are very, very important, but they're not absolute. So I think it's like, for me, it's very much like in the system design, but I'd be curious to get the panel's view on that.
You delivered on your promise of an excellent last question, I think.
I think one of the biggest elephant in the room we have to address, because it's very, very current, regarding women's health data and also the ethical handling of it, is flow. Right, I think everyone is probably thinking about it as well. Flow Health probably has the largest database on women's health data in the world. They did a big talk recently, and they have billions of users. They have lots and lots of users, massive database, very, very powerful. And what happened just 2 weeks ago? Had a massive class action lawsuit of mishandling of data, and I think they settled it off court. I think just for 11 million pounds, 12 million, for a paltry amount, given that they've essentially mishandled a large amount of data. So yes, industry has a very important role to curating this data, but we also have to be conscious of the fact that this data can also be mishandled as well. So I think that's the one point that we have to make. Now, as to how we should allow women or patients in general, not just women, but patients in general, to have to own their data through cross-boundaries area, I think that's more of a legal challenge as well, because there's GDPR in place, isn't it? There's GDPR in place, and God knows that I'm a secondary care doctor. I don't know what's happening to my patient in the primary care setting. So literally, I have a cancer patient. I have no idea what the GP is doing to my patient, and they're in the same board in the same health center. There's interoperability issues that are not being fixed right now. And yes, it's a tech issue, but it's actually more of a governance and legal issue.
But if I may butt in, but I think if we make it, so GDPR, I've been living within that regulation for years, and it's very nuanced, but it's almost been too legalistic. I think the EU AI Act has acknowledged that they've moved to more of a horizontal, risk-based, more practical approach. And so if make it, and this is what I see, is like if we say it's a legal issue, the lawyers are very important, but they maybe know the what, but not the how. So I think we're sort of translating it into privacy engineering and solutions, like thinking about privacy by design. How do we design those systems to connect that kind of like undercurrent? So I agree with you, but sometimes I see it because it's labelled a legal issue, it gets stuck at a legal issue. So just
Good
wanted
point.
to add that.
So in the public-private partnership Women's Health, I was just referring to, where we have the different roadmaps on more the content, cardiovascular, endometriosis, etc. We have addressed data, exchanging data as one of the main topics. So we started a kind of group that especially will handle how are we going to share data over the whole life cycle of these females. So I think it's one of the most important topics to cover in this collaboration.
Thank you. I think we just
One more question.
nicely finish on time. One last question. Do we have time? Yeah? Male representation.
Male representation.
Maybe 2 questions.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, I'm based in the Netherlands. I work also for a non-profit organisation supporting startups and going through the phase of innovation to get them to healthcare providers. And I've seen over the last few months a lot of traction around women's health. I think it's really exciting to have such great European representation here today, UK, Poland, and you mentioned Portugal. What can we do in terms of bringing Europe together to being stronger in tackling this? I think as the Netherlands, we've really looked at the US, and that's becoming more of a challenge moving forward. How can we really look to take some action so that we can bring all of the expertise from the European countries together to create more awareness and also get this into education and a topic on the table with the EU? That would be my question. And not just maybe to the panel, if anyone in the room has any input. Because I think we need to talk about it more after today's discussion.
Agree. No, absolutely agree.
Can I just offer one perspective? We can talk about policy, we can talk about funding, we can talk about everything. I think ultimately, how do we bring all this together? It's people. It's people. It's communities.
Yeah.
It's building communities. It's like I wrote a LinkedIn post recently about the UK innovation ecosystem. Got lots and lots of impressions, lots and lots of likes. But really, an innovation and ecosystem is only as strong as the individual components, the individual human beings, people who are passionate about this field, who are dedicating their time, their effort, not being paid for it, but really building and really try to pull people together. And there are lots and lots of people here, and I'm certain that many of you guys in here are exactly the people like this. The people who pull people together, try to herd the cats, to get them all working together. And I think that's what we need. We need more of these people bringing other people together, connect us in this space. So ultimately, I think even if it's small communities to people, but never underestimate how truly impactful these small communities can be.
We have over 100 people in this room. So if each of you thinks of, 2, 3 people in your network that you can influence to act, to ask for things, to demand things, that's already a lot of power in this room.
Indeed. Last question.
Is this on? Oh, it is. Hi, I'm Amy. I'm a founder, and I have a question actually that's following up on Sharon's question and coming back to the policy theme. So in America, there was an Alzheimer's drug recently that failed efficacy, and so they separated the efficacy out by gender, and then it succeeded in the men, and they got it approved. And which is shocking. It was really bad efficacy in women, and I wondered if there was some way, either through the FDA or the EMA, that would cost nothing to anyone in any small group to have all of the pharmaceutical drugs rerun their efficacy and their adverse event data separated by sex, and then see, because I think we all know we have different enzymes, women do, we break down alcohol differently, we break down all the drugs differently. And I think efficacy and adverse events are probably quite different in us. We have a lot of, adverse events. Usually the doctors see it. And that would be a way to make a splash that costs the pharmaceutical companies, no one else, that we are, meaningfully and in every way different.
As far as I know, as you mentioned, that's already done for new trials. So most, I think it's mandatory to do it to split it out for gender, as far as I know. What is not done?
It's not mandatory.
Is it not?
No. It also, the bias starts very early in animal trials. So researchers still prefer to use male mice and male rabbits over female mice and female rabbits. It's not mandatory. You have to allow women to take part in the clinical trial, but you don't have to actually make an effort to recruit them.
I thought you need at least 35%. As far as I know, you need at least 35%.
But they blend the data. So the efficacy is they tell you it was 49% women, but they don't tell you if it was effective differently in men versus women. They can tell you that they'll give you the efficacy, and then it can say it was this many women in it, but it's blended together. So when you separate it out, and if you separate out the adverse events by gender, that's not done. And yes, as Valentina noted, in the NIH specifically, we weren't required to have women in any of the trials until 1993, and so that's why Ambien, for example, works very differently in us. But the preclinical, it's only up to 35%, and part of the reason why they don't do the mouse in the trials is it makes the data much harder to read, and they want to get it done. But the pharmaceutical companies are under no obligation to separate that.
Also not for new trials? I thought not in the past, but for new trials I need. Okay. I learned it again.
Problem.
We have to... I got already a lot of signs from many different angles that we have to stop here. Thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you the panelists for the amazing discussion. And for anyone who would like to connect with us, Iris, Bianca, myself, you have our contact details also on the board if you'd like to come and chat. I think the next session here starts 4:30, so we can probably stay around for another 10 minutes. Thank you.